Take your NLP knowledge to the next level. Keep watching. I'm Damon, this is Life Mastery Gym, and I teach people just like you cutting-edge NLP processes and techniques so that you can master your life and take charge of your destiny. So if that sounds good, make sure you click that subscribe button right down here so you can get these videos on a regular basis. I've been studying, coaching, and teaching NLP for several years, and in that time, these two models that I'm going to go in depth with are models that I have learned from the men who created them. I've practiced them, I've used them, and I've coached with them. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand what makes these models work and what the limitations are of these models so that you can put it into practice in your own NLP practice in order to get the results that you want. This video is going to likely stir some controversy because I will be very critical upon a model that is pretty much widely held as a universal model taught in NLP, but I will break it down and I will expose its flaws. So if you have any comments or questions about it, make sure you leave that right down here below and I will respond to you. The reason I'm doing this video is because I just did a video on logical levels. Logical levels is one of the foundations of NLP. The man who created it, Gregory Bateson, was a teacher at the University of Santa Cruz, California, when NLP was being developed by John Grinder and Richard Bandler, the founders of NLP. And this was one of the theories that they used to create NLP. And pretty much all NLP is based on logical levels because we use logical levels to really understand the world around us. So I highly recommend that you check out that video on logical levels. I will link it to this video. So the reason I'm making this video is because some people saw that video and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And they started asking me questions about like, well, how can that be on this level? Or, what about the level of beliefs or identity? And it's like, wait a minute, you're obviously referencing neurological levels, which in the video, I state that neurological levels, a model created by Robert Dilts, is not logical levels. Supposedly, it's supposed to be a model based on logical levels, but it is actually not. And I'll explain in this video why it is not a true logical levels model. But what I've come to find is that most people think of neurological levels, this model that Robert Dilts created, and logical levels, the theory created by Gregory Bateson, that these are one and the same thing. And people use this interchangeably. So when they hear logical levels, they often immediately think of neurological levels. I want to clear this up. And it is important that we clear this up because this, like I said, is not a true logical levels model. And logical levels, if you're in NLP and you want to go deeper with NLP, you really want to understand it and understand it so that you can get the results that you want. It's very important that you understand logical levels. Now, in order to help me demonstrate what a true logical levels model is in NLP, and also to show you the difference between a model that is a true logical levels model and a model that is not, I'm going to use the self-concept model. The self-concept model was created by Steve Andreas, who was my late mentor before he passed away a few years ago. So I studied with Robert Dilts, and Robert Dilts taught me in my first practitioner training that I took neurological levels. And I worked with this model over a period of time and ran into a lot of limitations, and I couldn't really understand what was going on or why it wasn't working for me anymore until I met Steve Andreas and we discussed this model. He also helped me understand logical levels better and then also taught me the self-concept model, which is a true logical levels model. I'll be using these two as a comparison and contrast both of them so that you can understand logical levels better. So let's get started with neurological levels. I'll explain how it's supposed to work, and then I'll explain how the self-concept works based on logical levels, and then the differences between the two. So the idea with neurological levels is that you start here in environment, and this is like wherever you want to apply this model. This could be a career, this could be your relationship, what have you. And so it's about either getting aligned with some area of your life, or maybe you have a problem and you want to solve that problem. So the idea is you start here, okay, well, what's going on in my environment? And then what are my behaviors within that environment? And then we go up to, well, what am I capable of? What behaviors am I capable of in the environment? And then what are my beliefs in this environment, in this area of my life? What do I value in this area? And then that goes up to another level of identity. Who am I in this particular context, whatever it is that I'm working with. And then spiritual is supposed to be what I'm in service to, what is greater than myself that I am in service to. So the idea also is to identify, if you are working with a problem that you want to solve, is to figure out, well, where does the problem exist? Does it exist on an environmental level? Am I surrounding myself around the wrong people, and that's the problem, and all I need to do is change environment? Or is it a particular behavior that I'm engaging in, maybe a habit? Is that the problem? Or is it because I lack the capability to do something, and so therefore I need to go learn to do something that I don't know how to do right now? Is it an issue of I have a limiting belief about this area of my life? Or am I not clear about what I value in this area of my life? And then maybe it comes down to identity. Am I the person who can do this thing, whatever it is that I want to do, solve this problem, or be the role that I need to be in this particular area of my life? And then it's about getting clear what I'm in service to. And by understanding what I'm in service to, this whole thing is supposed to align to the spiritual, what I'm in service to. And so the other idea behind this is that any changes you make at any of the higher levels, it's supposed to cascade down and have an effect on the lower levels. And I think the way that Robert would probably teach this, if I remember correctly, is that when you make a change at a lower level, it is possible for the change to go up the logical levels, but in general, it doesn't work that way. That goes down the logical levels. And each one of these levels is thought of as a governing level. Now, is that absolutely true? Is that how logical levels, is that how it's supposed to work? And no, it's not. That's not how logical levels work. And actually, there's not much logic from one step to the next. Now, have I used this model and gotten good results out of it? Yes, I have. It is an interesting experience to go through this, yet I did run into some confusion and then eventually ran into some limitations due to what we would call content imposition. There's a lot of content imposed on this model. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, so why is this not a logical levels model? Well, if you've seen the other video that I did, I'll show you that in that other video, what I showed is that it is a progression. Logic, we're calling logic more like a progression. And you can go up the logical levels and down the logical levels. And what that really means is when you go down the logical levels, you're getting more specific. When you go up the logical levels, you're getting more general. So you're overlooking the differences of the lower logical levels and generalizing and becoming more vague and general. So I'll give you a quick demonstration of what I mean by that. So in the other video, I used an example, a car. Okay, so we can say car. Now, how would I go down the logical levels on the level of car? Well, I could say SUV. Okay, so that is more specific, a more specific car. So I'm not just talking about any car, I'm talking about an SUV. What if I want to go down another logical level? How would I do that? Well, I need to get more specific. So I would say, let's say Mercedes SUV, okay? So each time I go down the logical levels, I'm getting more specific and I'm cutting out more and more possibilities. So if I go from car, well, I'm meaning a car. I'm not talking about a bike. I'm not talking about an airplane. And then I go more specific and I say an SUV. So that cuts out vans, that cuts out station wagons, that cuts out everything that's not an SUV. And then if I get more specific, then I go Mercedes SUV. Well, I've cut out all of the other brands of SUV and focus more on a Mercedes SUV. And I could get even more specific here. I could say a blue Mercedes SUV. So every time I'm going down the logical levels, I'm becoming more specific and cutting out other possibilities. When I go up the logical levels, I get more general and I overlook the differences. So if I want to go up the logical levels from car, I could say vehicles with wheels. Okay, so that would include car, but it would also include bikes. It would include motorcycles, go-karts, golf carts, what have you. So we're now including more possibilities. We're overlooking the differences between all vehicles with wheels, and we're giving this category, all vehicles have wheels. Now, we could go even higher than this, and we could say transportation. So now we're basically including boats and airplanes as well as cars and motorcycles and all those things. So going up the logical levels, you become more general. Go down the logical levels, you become, it's about becoming more specific. This has many, many uses. I could do a whole nother video on why this is important. Just know that logical levels is how you think. How you create your reality around you and how you even see yourself is based on how you categorize your experiences. And your experiences move from one logical category to the next. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you're in a sales negotiation or a sales appointment and somebody objects, and the level in which they're objecting on is the level of money. They say it's too expensive. So if I think about that as a logical level and say, okay, well, they're stuck on this level of money, then where can I go from here? Well, you could get more specific. You could go down the logical levels and get more specific about what exactly the objection is. Like, so what specifically about money, or what specifically about it being too expensive, or how do you see it being too expensive? What exactly is too expensive about it? So I can go down the logical levels to gather more information about exactly why the person is objecting. There's more to it than just it's too expensive. Or I can go up the logical levels to understand, well, where is the value missing? Anytime you extract or elicit the value out of something, you're going up the logical levels. So if you are in sales, you know that it's rarely really about money. They don't feel like they're going to get the value that they would pay for it. So when we're talking about value, if you go up the logical levels to understand what that person really values and where the disconnect is, then you can maybe overcome the objection. Logical levels is super important in understanding yourself, how you categorize your reality, how you categorize yourself, how to be more influential and persuasive by understanding what logical level the person is objecting on, and then deciding, okay, which logical level do I need? Do I need to go down the logical levels by gathering more specific information, or do I go up the logical levels by getting more general and learning more about what the person values, or just realizing, okay, well, this person, I know that they have this experience on a certain logical level. I just need to get them to include paying for whatever it is that I'm selling into that category. So many, many uses for this, and very therapeutic uses for this. But like I said, I could do a whole nother video on that, but I want to get to what we're doing here. So let's break down neurological levels and see why and how this doesn't work as a logical levels model. Okay, so when you think logic, what may be helpful to you is to think, okay, how do you take the next logical step in something? And a very easy way to do this is numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't jump to 3 from 1 to 3 unless there's a specific reason to do it, if you're counting in threes. But let's just keep this simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That could be seen as logical levels. It's progressing logically through these numbers. You need 1 before you can have 2. You need 2 before you can have 3. So it's a logical progression. So if we took environment and we did what I did with the car here, and I said, okay, well, let's do logical levels on just this level, environment. Well, how would you get more specific about environment? You would be specific about the environment you're talking about. So you could say, well, an environment, a work environment, or you could even go into something more ecological, like it's a rainforest. That's the environment that is. So we're getting more specific. We would be going down the logical levels. Well, what if we went up the logical levels on environment? There is no logical connection to behavior. There's nothing here that goes logically from environment to behavior. Sure, you behave in a certain way, and anytime you're behaving in a certain way, well, it's going to be in some sort of environment, true, but there's no logical connection. There's no logical progression from environment to behavior. So a logical progression that would go up the logical levels from environment could just be space. You have to have space. What contains an environment? Well, it's more space. So space might be a logical level you would use to go up the logical levels. Behavior would not at all be a logical connection to environment. So let's then take behavior. Well, if we went down the logical levels on behavior, we would be very specific about the type of behavior. Well, it could be something like bad behavior or good behavior. And then we could get more specific about that. Well, what is good behavior? And we could, point at specific behaviors that we think of as good. If we went up the logical levels of behavior, you might be able to make a decent logical connection to beliefs, but that's a bit of a jump. But I would say for sure there is a logical connection to values, because every behavior is trying to fulfill a value. So actually, this would be more of a connection if you were going up the logical levels from behavior than capabilities would be. There's not really, there isn't really a logical connection to capability. Now, I know how Robert meant it is that, well, you first have to be capable of doing something before you can actually do the behavior. But I'm not seeing the logical connection to that. And then we go to capabilities and beliefs. There's something here. I think, in order to be capable of doing something, you probably have to believe you can do it. So that might work. Capabilities and values, I don't see the connection. And then we run into another problem here, is this category, the beliefs and values being on the same logical level. I don't understand that. That doesn't really compute. Beliefs are very different than values. Beliefs, believe it or not, are actually an automation. You don't know something to be true, but you collect enough experiences about it that you make a generalization. You believe things are a certain way. And that sort of acts as a placeholder, because we can't possibly know everything. We can't possibly know all truth. And beliefs help us to automate things in the sense of, I don't have to constantly figure out all over again what I think about something. The belief sort of automatically informs that. And that's where beliefs can get us into trouble. But at the same time, our beliefs also serve a very important purpose. We don't have to renegotiate everything with ourselves and make a completely new decision. When all factors seem to be the same, we just have a belief, well, that's what I like to do. I know I like red wine, so I don't have to negotiate this. I believe that the next time I go to have red wine, that I will enjoy it, and that I don't need to think about, should I choose red wine over white wine? I already know what I like. Now, is it possible I could find a white wine that I like better than a red wine? It's always possible, but I'm pretty settled in my belief that that's not going to happen and that I like red wine. So values they're what's driving your behavior. It's what drives your actions. It's what drives your decision. Every decision, every behavior is an attempt to fulfill a value. So how these end up in the same logical category really makes no sense to me. There is not a strong connection here that would put them on the same level. So if you thought about like car, what would be on the same logical level as car? You can make the argument that an airplane, because they're both forms of transportation. So you can make that argument. But these are two different. There's nothing really connecting them here to be on the same logical level. Now, identity, the thing about identity is actually beliefs could easily be put over identity, because identity is a belief. It's your identity. It's also known as self-concept. You don't have a hard fact about who you are. There are people who know you and they have an idea of who you are, but every person's going to have a different idea of who you are, and even you are going to have a different idea than everybody else because you are living it from the inside. So we have a concept of who we are, and another word for concept is belief. So actually, it would be more fitting if beliefs were over identity, because identity is one kind of belief, whereas beliefs encompass all beliefs. So it would actually belong at a higher logical level. Now, the spiritual, here's the hard thing. Not all of us are spiritual in that sense. Not all of us believe in a soul and that sort of thing. So if we pull that part out of it and we just say, okay, well, what are you in service to? Your identity is not necessarily in service to something greater than yourself. You could totally have an identity that is completely in service to yourself. A narcissist certainly experiences that. So putting spiritual, like this idea of being in service to something else, isn't necessarily a logical connection. There isn't necessarily a logical connection here. You might be able to make one, but you would have to get more specific about this. It's not specific enough to say that this is a more general logical level. A more general logical level, as we will see over here, is how you evaluate your identity. A few questions about neurological levels. First of all, Robert's a great guy. I'm not here to bash him. He was one of my first NLP teachers, and he's a great guy. So I'm only critiquing his work here. Is this a useful model? I have gotten use out of this. I have used it when I was learning it, and it helps me understand some things. It helped me clear up some problems that I was dealing with. So in that sense, I found it useful. If you find it useful, I'm not here to tell you what you should and should not do. If you find this useful, if you use it, then continue. Just understand that there are flaws and there are shortcomings and there are a lot of limitations to this model. Being that it's not a true logical levels model, this is not actually how you function and operate. Now, what this is a lot of content imposition on this. So what do I mean by that? This was very confusing to me. I had an email exchange with John Grinder, which didn't go very well. He wanted to know who my teachers were right up front. I told him Robert was one of them, and then he started railing on content imposition. I didn't understand it until I met Steve Andreas, and he was able to enlighten me on what content imposition is. The idea behind an NLP model is that it is purely structure, no content. And there's a very important reason for that, because content, when it comes to change, content when it comes to, say, therapy, slows us down. We can talk endlessly about our whys and our stories, and we just can get lost in content. So it really slows us down. What we're looking for is a structure of how it works. So think about like language and like grammar. You can extract that structure of grammar. Grammar is how the language is held together. So logical levels is a clue as to what holds our reality together. And if it's a pure logical levels model, there's no content imposition. So another way of me saying this is that when Robert created this, he imposed a lot of content on it, which means he imposed his own content. This is more of a clue about how Robert thinks than it is how we universally process information, how we universally process our sense of self, our beliefs, our values, our behavior, all of these things. This is not very universal, because what we've got here is an NLP-inspired model that has a lot of Robert's content of how he thinks and behaves and processes the world, not how people universally process information in the world around them. Now, the self-concept model, as far as I can tell, because I've worked with this model for several years, is a content-free model. And one clue as to why I know that is because I still have yet to reach its limitation. I plug in the content as I need it. When I'm working with a client, we plug in their content. When anybody is using this model, it's clean of any content, so you plug in your own. And therefore, it goes infinitely deep because you are infinitely deep. It might not make complete sense to you right now, but if you use this model a lot, you will understand. This model, as well as most of the NLP models I had used before coming to this one, I ran into some limitation at some point. And now I realize that when I run into a limitation with the model, it's always possible there's a limitation with my understanding of the model. Therefore, I will study it further. But there comes a certain point where it's like, no, I understand the model completely. There are limitations here. There is content being imposed here. And by the time I met Steve Andreas, I had hit a plateau, because I had practiced these models for years and I was putting everything I had into it, but I wasn't making any more progress. My understanding wasn't growing. And when I met Steve, he sort of freed me from that, because he taught me this model here that has no content imposition on it, and it's a true logical levels model. So let's talk about it here. So self-concept, that would be Robert's identity and neurological levels. So let's talk about self-concept. I forgot my L. So this is identity. What would be on a lower logical level than identity? Well, that's the qualities about who you are. So this is also considered a belief. It's a generalization, your sense of self. The qualities about yourself are also further generalizations you make about yourself. I'm kind, I'm weak, I'm successful, I'm a failure. All of those are qualities of who you are. So we're getting more specific about your sense of self and qualities. So we're going down the logical levels. And then, well, what makes up qualities? Lower level experiences. You gather up experiences and you start to categorize them. And as you categorize them, the ones you categorize that have something to do about you, that are self-reflective, we call these qualities. And again, the qualities of who I am. I'm this, I'm that. And then when I put all that together, when I bundle up all those qualities into a bigger, broader, more generalization, I get my sense of self. The sense of self is huge. You just kind of know it, right? You just kind of know who you are. You can chunk it down and going into qualities, and then you can talk about your experiences that made up those qualities. Like, okay, I'm intelligent. Well, how do I know that? Because I've had experiences of being intelligent, passing tests or solving problems. So then I believe that I have this quality of being intelligent. And then I gather up all of my qualities, and that gives me my sense of self. Now, on a higher logical level, if we go up from self-concept, it's an evaluation. It's how I feel about myself. So we're going meta. And one way that you go up the logical levels is by going meta to whatever is below it. So this is my sense of self, my identity, my self-concept. Go meta to that. How do I feel about it? That is where we get self-esteem. Now, there is this idea in neurological levels that the questions that I've been getting, I've been contending with this idea that, well, Damon, how can you create change here? You can't change, people do try to change self-esteem directly. Doesn't work. I'm sure you've tried. Things like affirmations. You can say whatever you want about yourself. You can kind of pump yourself up a little bit, but if it's not rooted in actual experience, it'll blow away just like dust in the wind. So you probably have tried, like, I'm just going to change myself. That doesn't work so well. That might last for a little while. Well, we work here at the level of qualities. We change qualities, and then that creates a change in your sense of self. Every time you change a quality about who you are, if you believe you're a failure, and then we work together, we do some coaching, and then you come out feeling like you are a success based in real experiences. We just recode those experiences so it's real. And then now you have a quality of feeling like you are successful. Well, that changes your self-concept. And if you value success and you believe you are successful, that shifts your self-esteem. So we make change here, and the change goes up from here. In the neurological levels, it's believed that you have to make change at a higher logical level, and then the change goes down. So I'm getting into this argument with people who are saying that this is impossible because of this. And it's like, no, this model is inaccurate. It doesn't work that way. This is an accurate logical levels model. This is where we do change, and this is how it affects up to here. Now, logical levels, there are so many ways that you can apply logical levels. So could you have logical levels where you do make changes at the top level and that they cascade down? Theoretically, yeah, absolutely, that's possible. That's not what's happening here, and that's not what's happening here, but it's certainly possible. Here, we make changes here. And actually, we don't actually change the content of the experiences, we change how you code those experiences. Now, on that video that I did with logical levels, I asked everyone if they would like a video on scope and category, which was Steve Andreas's unifying field theory of NLP. And I will do, the next video I do will be a video on scope and category where I go more in depth about this model and how logical levels, how Steve expanded on logical levels to create his theory on scope and category. And that's where it really takes off. When you start to understand scope and category, you have an enormous amount of power to change yourself and change your life. To summarize, the importance of understanding this, the importance of understanding logical levels. And remember, apart from neurological levels, logical levels is something different than neurological levels. Very important to understand that because it seems to be confusing a lot of people based on the questions and the comments that I got on the last video. So why is this important? It's important to understand what a content-free model is. Because like I said, this model, I have not come to the limitations on this model. I've been using this model for years, and I've just acquired or arrived at greater and greater levels of fulfillment. And I just keep using it, and it keeps getting better and better. And what that lets me know is that it's pure structure. And all you're doing is you're going through the structure within your identity. And I'm plugging in all the content that's needed. When I'm working with a client, we're plugging in their content. So it's universal. You can just drop it into any person's identity, and it's just a matter of plugging in their content, because everything else is purely structure, no content imposition. Whereas this one has the content imposition, which means you might get some use out of it, but at a certain point, it's not going to be able to help you, or it's certainly not going to be able to solve a lot of problems that it's supposed to be able to solve. Now, the question becomes too, is this real NLP? And there are a lot of critics of this model who will say, no, this is not NLP. I have studied NLP for quite some time, and I would say I'm pretty good at it and pretty knowledgeable at it, but I'm not comfortable in saying what is NLP and what is not NLP, because I think even the founders have different ideas of what it is and what it is not. By John Grinder's definition, one of the founders of NLP, this is not NLP, and then this would be NLP. It's important to understand logical levels, because the more you understand it, the more you will understand how you're creating your life experience and how you're creating your sense of self. The more you understand that, the more choice you have about that, the more freedom you will have about that, the more you will be able to direct, guide, and align your life to get the fulfillment that you want, which is really what self-esteem and confidence is all about. When you truly understand this and you can make this model work, you just keep achieving greater and greater levels of fulfillment. And like I said, because it's content free, I have yet to meet the limitation on this. Understanding that you can even get to a point where you don't need to refer to the model every single time you want to make a change. Just understanding what logical level you're on, or what logical level you're solving a problem on, and then you can go into many different levels to find the solution to it, and then bring it back down, pop it in, and then you can solve the problem. Find the fulfillment that you're looking for. If you found this interesting, yet you're still not sure about everything, that is absolutely normal. Don't beat yourself up about it, because this is complex stuff, and this has taken me years to understand, and I don't think I would understand it to the extent that I do now had I not worked with this model for years and then been working with this model for years. If you want to go deeper with this and you want even more explanation and some exercises that you can use to understand this better and get those changes that I was mentioning, we will be doing a 3-part webinar next week. You need to sign up for it now. It will be on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and we have morning times and evening times, because I know some of you are in different parts of the world. You want to get in on this now. The spots will fill up. It is free. It's three 1-hour sessions, approximately 1 hour, possibly more with the questions that we'll have. So in the description below, there is a link. Click on that link and enroll in this. And here's the thing. Only enroll if you're really intending to show up. I'm looking for people who are really interested, really serious about understanding this, because we're going to go really deep on these sessions, and you're going to walk away with an actual plan, something that you can put to use right after the session that we do for each time. So you'll have 3 sessions where we'll go really, really deep, and you'll have a plan. We'll put it all together. It will be interactive, and I will be answering your questions. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button right down here and click that bell so you'll be notified when I put new videos out. And last but not least, if you can think of a friend or a family member who you think would benefit from this video, make sure you share it with them. Take care.